The effects of heroin just made me sleep.
Just could really be numb and like not have to feel anything or deal with, you know, any responsibilities with life or with family or really anything.
Every time I take a shot of heroin or drink a bottle of liquor, it makes things that hurt non-existent anymore.
It was like being able to breathe again. It ended up just being necessary to survive.
It helped me not think about my feelings, and it helped mute out disappointments I had about myself.
My family has absolutely been afraid of my death because of my addiction and have been waiting that phone call for a long time.
The disease of addiction is obsession and compulsion and inability to control the use of any mind-altering substance.
I use drugs and alcohol to escape feelings and because I like the feeling produced by them.
I didn't know myself when I was clean. I didn't know things that I liked. I didn't feel whole. I didn't feel like I fit in. My perception of myself was twisted, so when I used, I felt a lot better.
I recognized having a problem, but I didn't really care. I compared my addiction to other people's addictions, and I just didn't think that it was bad enough or good enough to stop.
There were multiple times where when I tried to stop using because I wanted to, and there's multiple times I tried to stop using just to get people off my back.
I've wanted to stop using drugs for a pretty significant amount of time now.
My name's Casey. I am 31 years old, and I am a recovering addict from using heroin, mostly. Sometimes, occasionally it would be methamphetamines. And that started when my husband passed away when I was 25 years old. Pretty traumatic because he had hung himself in a jail cell. So I had coped with that not so well by using drugs within the first 5 months of losing him. I wasn't using before that. The effects of heroin just made me sleep. I didn't have to really deal with anything. I didn't really have to face any problems that day. I was able to pretty much just escape. So it was difficult because I was now a single mom at 25 years old, having to function every day with an everyday routine. And I was living every day with him, thinking that my life was going to go one direction when now it's completely going a different direction. And now I have to figure this out. So that was a struggle on its own. So I started using, trying to, set aside all the feelings that were coming with grief. There's different stages of grief, and I was definitely in that denial for a long time. I did not want to face the fact that he was basically my life was what it was at that moment, and I didn't also want to, it wasn't so much that I was suicidal. It's not so much that I wanted to die. It was that I didn't care if I did, because it was like I wouldn't have to feel anything anymore. And then when I got clean, it was almost as if the grieving process went on restart, or it was on pause until I got clean, because I wasn't able to really truly feel the true emotions that you feel when you go through the grieving process of losing somebody, especially a spouse at that age. Not many people lose a spouse at 25 years old. So I felt really alone. And that was when I wanted to start completely numbing that entire process. I didn't want to face the real emotions. I didn't want to cry. I felt like that was a weak thing to do. Everybody was praising me when he passed away, that I was so strong. So crying to me then meant that I was dealing with being weak.
I think grief is a part of the recovery process, actually, because it's such a similar grieving, like the grieving death is a, you know, or anything else. There's the 5 different stages, and I feel like as an addict, we subconsciously go through those stages once we stop using the drugs that we've been putting into our body for such long periods of time, without even knowing that it's grief that we're going through.
My name is Thunder. I'm 26 years old, and my drug of choice is heroin. I started using when I was 11 years old. My dad was he liked his pain pills, so there's multiple times where when I got my hands on some pain pills when I was young, I wanted to be like my father. So I know my dad liked pain pills, and he passed away, and then I was like, once I found that euphoria of opiates, I was like, it's a closer connection with my dad. He's trying to connect to me or something. So that's the way I thought when I was younger. So the way my dad died, he was 38 years old. He had a heart attack. He had a kind of like a boating job, like an oceaneer. And he was out for 6 months, and he came back, and we had a really nice dinner. And then that morning, I wanted to play sick so I could stay with my father, and he said, no, school's most important, go to school, I'll be here when you get back. So I trust my father, you know, and basically when I got home from school, I ran to home, and there was like, in the corner of my eye, I saw like my father's feet hanging out of the doorway, and I thought he was playing a prank on me. So what I did is I just walked and I was like, got ya! And it was really him. He passed away. He had a heart attack, and his eyes were wide open. I touched his skin; it's ice cold. And I tried to give him CPR like how the movies. I didn't really know CPR. I wasn't really trained to do CPR at that age, but I couldn't get him back to life. I tried it my hardest, and a lot of, like, it was just a lot to take in. I was crying, and I ran outside and I flagged someone down, and I was in 5th grade when he passed away. I was in 5th grade when my father passed away. I've used drugs to escape from my own reality, and I wanted to be in my head, like I wanted something that made me feel powerful. I got into 12-step programs since I was 18 years old, in and out, and it's just like I've seen a lot of people die, you know, and I've seen a lot of people get lost in their mind, or have, you know. So I never ever planned on stopping abusing until other people or something intervened. But honestly, deep in my heart, I was never planning on ever getting. I've overdosed multiple times, put myself in the hospital multiple times. They've brought me back, and there was a bunch of paramedics around me. There was a few times like that, and every time they're like, "Oh, you're so lucky." There's multiple times where paramedics were upset to see me, like they would treat me like dog shit, you know. But it's a snap of the fingers, and then you're being brought back to life. I don't know if there's an afterlife or not, but I guess it's just not my time to leave.
When I overdosed, I was unconscious, and I was revived with Narcan twice. The other times, there was one time I was coherent, like I knew I was overdosing, and it was like I was in a panic and didn't know what to do, and had to kind of, like, it was weird, like I knew I wasn't okay, and then I felt like I was like gonna die, but I was still awake, but I was extremely like intoxicated, and it didn't feel like I was dead or anything, but I thought I had like just gone to sleep for a little while and woke up, but like I woke up in my boyfriend's arms and he was crying because I was like unconscious. My name's Samantha, I'm 27. My drug of choice is heroin and meth, along with many other things. I started using when I was 14 years old. I started drinking and experimenting with marijuana and stuff like that. There were several times when I wanted to stop using, but I couldn't. I went to detox 8 times, and they ended up not letting me back in. I would take leaves of absences from school to go get clean. I'd get 3 or 4 days in the detox center, I'd get released, and then I'd get loaded, and I'd tell myself I'm just going to use this one time because physically and mentally I was not well getting out of the detox center, but didn't know that I needed extra care when I left. I thought the drugs are out of my body, I'm fine, but mentally I couldn't handle it. I was obsessed with the thought of getting high again. I had a period of time where there was like 3 days in a row where I almost died. I overdosed. I was in a very bad car accident and I'm unconscious for 8 hours in the hospital at Harborview. And the thought of dying was scary, but it almost just seemed like it was inevitable, like it was bound to happen, like I wasn't gonna have a life later on, like, you know, maybe I'd last a couple more years, but I was gonna die an addict.
More and more you use, the more I thought I wasn't worthy enough to be alive anyways. So it wasn't like, because that's what, you know, people don't really look good upon when people are using. So I don't want, what's the point of me being alive if I don't have anything to live for, if I'm not fulfilling anything?
There were multiple times I was afraid I was going to die, but I felt like because I used the drugs to numb my feelings, it didn't affect me so much, the fear of dying, but I had succumbed to the fact and like became okay with the fact that I was probably going to die a drug addict. My name is Sarah Taylor. I'm 26 years old. I started using when I was about 13 years old, and my drugs of choice were heroin and cocaine. At first it was a social thing, and it was kind of to fit in, and then it got to the point where I was using drugs because I felt bad about using drugs, which made me use more drugs, and then I ended up getting addicted. So withdrawing from heroin and cocaine is pretty excruciating. You know, you go through sweats and aches, you'd have goosebumps, but be sweating at the same time. I felt really restless, and it was, I think the hardest part was I would be completely exhausted and wanted to sleep, but my body wouldn't allow me to sleep without the drugs. So that was really difficult. I myself personally had been to treatment about 3 times, and I relapsed every time. And then I finally committed a crime, and I was incarcerated for 3 months, and that's what got me sober.
I've met a lot of men in the program and in recovery that it took them going to prison for significant periods of time to discover what they truly wanted in life, and they needed that time of abstinence.
When I was 17, I got arrested twice for possession. The justice system is definitely a huge blessing for a lot of addicts because we get so tied up in the lifestyle and what we're doing and ways and means to get loaded, and you know, a lot of addicts need that, you know, that ability to stop and get put away and kind of have some consequences for their actions. I'm Allie, I'm 24. My drug of choice was prominently alcohol and cocaine and Molly, aka ecstasy, MDMA. Pretty much anything and everything though. I started using when I was 13. My view on death when I was using was kind of always an option, you know. I didn't really like myself, and like I said, I had stuffed a lot of my feelings, and it wasn't really something that scared me. I know several people that have died from overdoses and other addiction-related issues.
A lot of people are dying left and right, and when you're in the rooms, it's like gossip. It's just like, oh, guess what? This person died, and you're like, oh man, that sucks. And then you're on to the next one, on to the next one. It's just, it's like a game show, like Survivor.
I've had several people from high school that I was in the same grade with, like friends with, that have overdosed and died within the last like 4 or 5 years. And then when I had a little over a year clean, one of my best friends overdosed and died. She had had a few years clean and then had relapsed and come back into the rooms and gotten 60, like 30, 60, 90 days clean, and then it relapsed, and then finally came up on about 6 months clean. And then she said she was just going through like a hard time or something, and like told me a couple things that had happened, and like, you know, we were out together. She dropped me off, and the next day then she had went and used and overdosed and died. I think since I've gotten clean, at least every few months, there's either been somebody that I've known or an acquaintance that has passed away due to addiction. I don't think that they were just like, oh, I want to go use and I want to die. And like, maybe some people feel that way, but like the people that I have known that have passed away haven't like gone out with that intention. I thought death was an option when I was using, but I honestly thought it would never happen to me, but there was some pretty close calls. And even though there were close calls, I still was like, it probably won't happen to me.
I absolutely do think it's possible that I could die from my addiction. My name is Justin. I'm 30 years old. My drug of choice are actually 3 different drugs: alcohol, heroin, and benzodiazepines. I remember being 13 when I got my first good drunk. All I knew is that was how I wanted to feel for the rest of my life. In the last 17 years, the longest time I've had consecutively was 6 months off of drugs and alcohol. Getting high on heroin, it's almost like a security blanket that makes you not give a fuck about anything or anybody. For me personally, it's been hard to quit because of the bridges I've burned, so to speak, and the situations and opportunities or lack of opportunity I have to be able to move forward because of the problems I caused with using drugs and alcohol. I have been suicidal on several occasions. Let's see, sorry, lots of words. So I've been suicidal for several different reasons, one of which has been because I couldn't get off drugs. Others have varied from being an absentee parent because I couldn't be around my children while I was on drugs. Some of the actual attempts I've made were because I didn't have any self-value or self-worth, regardless of what the world or anybody else thought of me. It is hard on families when they lose a loved one to drugs and alcohol. Depending on the severity of the person's use and how long they've been using, I know in my personal experience, my family has absolutely been afraid of my death because of my addiction and have been awaiting that phone call and have been treated as if I was already dead for a long time. I've wanted to stop using drugs for a pretty significant amount of time now. I have only ever had a hard time getting into a drug and alcohol detox or treatment center. It generally is months of waiting, and I'm told that I have to continuously stay homeless and continue to use in order to get that. I've been denied too many times to count. with young people that aren't afraid to die and don't think that it's going to happen to them. You know, people don't feel the need or the urgency. You know, they haven't found that desperation. I think addicts take death less seriously, because I personally have come so close and still been able to maintain and survive. This is a scar, 3 different surgeries from intermuscular use of heroin in Center City, Philadelphia. As you can see, it went all the way through my arm. And they should have taken my arm, but they figured out how to keep it. I absolutely do think it's possible that I could die from my addiction. One of my closest, oldest friends about a year ago was very new to using IV drugs, and I was living in Austin, Texas at the time. He was a father, and him and his girlfriend had just split up, and he was camping with his son. And when he put his son to bed, he waited to do any drugs until he put his son to bed. And the next morning, his son found him cold, and he thought his 9-year-old son had found him cold because he thought he froze to death when he had died of an accidental heroin overdose. That little boy that found him is also my son's best friend. The person who died on the sidewalk from an overdose is just as important as fucking Amy Winehouse. I know too many people that have died from overdose from addiction. When friends of addicts die of overdoses or drug-related causes, I do believe that it affects their recovery.
Death in the recovery community is so much harder, because a lot of times you get to know these people. They become your friends, your acquaintances, and you see them trying to live purposeful lives and trying to better themselves, and they've made it out on the other side. And and then one day you hear that somebody you knew died, and it happens on a regular basis, and it's just it makes it really hard.
And I think it's personally affected me, because it sucks to say, but like, you kind of get jaded after a while. Like, each one's different, but they're the same. But like, I feel jaded because it's happened so many times that it's like it's almost not surprising anymore. But it doesn't hurt any less.
I think that if I had died from my addiction, I definitely feel like my family would have felt some pain and loss, but I also don't think they would have been surprised. The way and the direction my life was going, that was the next step for me, was death. And I think that they would have been hurt and upset, but I don't think that it would have come as a shock to them.
I definitely think that my family would experience guilt and shame if I died as a result of my addiction. I come from a very long line of addiction. Both of my parents are currently in recovery, and I have other family members that are still loaded or in treatment. My brother is in treatment currently. And so, yeah, I think that they would definitely blame themselves and wonder if they could have done more,
There's a lot of shame and guilt involved within drug addiction and alcoholism in families. My family have a lot of family members who are in recovery, or some who still are using drugs and alcohol. I'm Doreen Reber, and I'm the Family Court Operations Director for King County Superior Court. I've been with Superior Court for 24 years this year, and prior to working there, I worked in child welfare in California for 13 years. When I was in my early 40s, my brother died of a drug overdose at 40 years old. He had been using drugs for most of his life, and it was easier for my mother to say that he died of a heart attack. It was the truth and the reality of dying of an overdose in someone's bathroom or bathtub or over a toilet was just very unacceptable for her to be able to believe. So she needed to say he died of a heart attack to anybody. And sure, his heart stopped working as a result of the drugs that he overdosed on. And it was different in every single way from the first brother's death. There was a lot more shame involved. She didn't tell people what happened or how it happened. The ceremony for his death was very small and in a town far away. There was a lot of shame involved, I think, for everybody in that. And then, of course, I think my parents wondering what they could have done differently, how they may have contributed to his continued use. Certainly, as a parent, I could understand that would really hold heavy on your heart for that. Well, what did I do? What could I have done? But certainly, there was a lot of embarrassment and shame around that. So I am a two-time cancer survivor, and I would say that if my death comes eventually one day as a result of cancer, people would have a fine time putting that into an obituary, saying it's a sad thing, saying it's a medical thing, saying it was. And I think if somebody dies of an overdose, absolutely not. That doesn't happen. Same disease concept. I think people believe that there's more control over addiction than addicts have. I don't think they necessarily understand all of the components and all the things that go into addiction.
People are going to view the deaths of a drug addict as opposed to a cancer victim differently, absolutely. A drug addict overdosing is just another statistic.
This is their punishment. You know, if addicts die from that, then it's like that they deserve this. It seems like our society is really supports the idea of, you know, locking someone up and having them pay for what they've done.
Where we're lacking as a system is reentry programs for what people do after they get let out of jail, you know, because most people that have been incarcerated, addict or not, reoffend without the opportunity to grow and flourish in our society because they get judged, you know.
I think that, like, there's help available for people, but I don't think that there's enough. Because when people try to get into inpatient treatment, I feel like it's this long waiting list, and there's people that are like, I'm literally gonna probably, like, die within the next couple weeks, or, like, maybe, like, in the next couple days if I don't get into treatment. Or they need help immediately, but they can't get it, and they're on, like, a waiting list, and
there isn't one person who could hear this video who probably doesn't have a family member, a friend who's affected. And so if you come at it from a human standpoint, from a compassionate standpoint, we'll start there. Everybody deserves, imagine if it was your mother, your father, your child, your aunt, your uncle, your cousin, your neighbor. They deserve that treatment, they deserve that health, they deserve a life, and everybody should be rallying around them to get that so that they can be the productive member of society that they want to be.
I absolutely think that addicts' lives are worth saving. You know, it's funny because addicts are definitely looked down upon by society, and I think it's just because of a lack of understanding. But you know, if you take the time to get to know a group of recovering addicts, they're some of the most intelligent people you will ever meet. And very talented, so I absolutely think they're worth saving.
I think in order to ever see a change in the culture, we've got to do it one person at a time. I mean, we've been watching people die now for years, and it hasn't affected change in the culture.
So I think that long-term recovery is definitely possible, and I've seen it. There are people that do have the time and that do show up and are consistent, and I think that that's the issue for a lot of us, is that, you know, our lives get good or our lives get bad, and we stop becoming consistent in the process of recovery. And, you know, people get lives and they stop coming to meetings, or, you know, they decide that they want to try one more time, or they want to just go back out, or they don't want to feel their feelings, you know. And it's definitely there aren't very many options for us if we don't get clean. I mean, it's going to be usually jails, institutions, and death.
My body is a cage that keeps me from dancing with the one I love. My mind holds the key. My body is a cage that keeps me from dancing with the one I love, but my mind holds the key.